Hey y'all, how are you doing? I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. It's me, Kim, and I'm back for another video. How are y'all doing? How has your week been? Happy belated Valentine's Day. I hope you had a great day. I had a really good day. I went to go see Casey Musgraves. I know. Like it was a hard choice, right? But we had that whole weekend. We had the whole weekend before, okay? And Casey Musgraves was in town on the 14th, and I was like, oh, like what do I do? But I had such a good time at the concert. So celebrate love over the weekend. And then I went to the concert yesterday and I don't feel bad. I don't feel bad because it was so good. She was so great. Anyway, shout out to Golden Hour. I am obviously still in a festive mood. I have my pink sweater on. It's been a minute. Hi. Let me check the comments. Hi. Yes. All right. So the first thing that I have to do again, you know that my number one responsibility is being the best aunt in the world. So I have to encourage y'all to buy cookies from my niece Victoria. Okay, here's what happened. I put my other niece, I have twin nieces, right? And so one of them, I put the link on the Tasha K video, and that like link has gone crazy. And so she sold so many more cookies than her sister. And so now I have a responsibility to try to even it out. So if you still, have not purchased your Girl Scout cookies for the season, the link is in the description box below. Please help us, right? We don't want any sibling rivalry, okay? We don't want any feuds. Anyways, let's get into it. Love the energy. Oh, thank you. All right. It's time to be serious, you guys. Let's talk about Joe Rogan, the controversies he's currently embroiled in, and why he's never getting canceled. Ready? All right. This is Joe Rogan. And when I say Joe Rogan isn't going anywhere, I'm not attaching any kind of value judgment to that. That's just a statement of fact. I believe that one of the reasons why people who have my politics lose so much, lose politically, lose in messaging, is because we do not spend enough time thinking through what's working and why it's working. And the conversations that I've seen around Joe Rogan really epitomize that. So I see a lot of people saying the obvious, he's so fucking stupid, this shit is fucking dumb, like who would listen to this? Like this is so harmful, and finger wagging, and that's bad. And even if it's true, right? Like even if we really understand that the way that Joe Rogan conducts his interviews and the way that he navigates his platform can often be really irresponsible, is that useful, right? Right? Like, is that contributing to a productive conversation? And is it getting us closer to a strategy to combat it, right? And so I'm always thinking, because I love media, because I use this platform to advocate for issues that I really believe deeply in, I'm always thinking about, all right, so we're losing the messaging war. How can we win it? That's what this video is going to be about. I also think that this is going to be a useful companion video to the video I did a couple weeks ago about Tasha K, because there are different kinds of provocateurs, right? And the level and sustainability of your success is dependent on your demographics, meaning, the body you show up in and the bodies you appeal to, but also your tactics. And so much of this is about the way that you are able to finesse the media industry. Okay. So, what this is going to be is a signature Kimberly deep dive. And I want to say it's going to be long. And my warning, my caveat is, no matter where you stand on the Rogan stuff, there is going to be some ideas in this video that are going to annoy you. Because these things are complicated and I don't always perfectly toe the party line here. All right. All right, let's go. Who is Joe Rogan? Joe Rogan is a 54-year-old former actor and TV host who has become one of the biggest podcasters in the world. And he also moonlights as a UFC fight commentator. Fun facts, right? Look at Joe Rogan, right? Let's just like look at this man. Man in his mid 50s, obviously juiced up, roided up, HGH'd up, allegedly. Allegedly. But look at him, man. Look at that neck. Okay. Some things are being taken there. Okay. Some performance and physique enhancing substances are being taken. All right. So Rogan launched the Joe Rogan Experience podcast in 2009. And we're going to call it the JRE because it's just too long. The JRE was downloaded 200 million times in 2019 and earned $30 million in 2019 as an independent podcast. That is an astronomical number. I mean, unbelievable. It's extraordinary. It's like Thriller. It's the podcast version of Thriller, is what it is. And so I don't know if Rogan came up with the idea of doing the super long talking podcasts and then creating a separate YouTube channel to clip them up to optimize for virality on YouTube, but he certainly perfected it. And that is the model that so many other people are following now. I actually came to the JRE because of those clips. He's had a couple of people that I really like on, like Cornell West. I like the interview that he did with Miss Pat, as problematic as she is, right? But she's a good storyteller. And that's how I came to them, right? And so that strategy has helped the podcast grow at a really remarkable rate. All right, next. In 2020, he signed a $100 million licensing agreement with Spotify. And as a part of the deal, what's going to happen is he licenses the content to Spotify, meaning Spotify has the exclusive rights to broadcast the podcast, publish it, and then only clips go on YouTube now. $100 million. He's rich. Right. Okay, let's go here. Title card 2, the controversy. Oh, let's go there. The controversy. Okay. So this all kicked off because in December of last year, he had this infamous anti-COVID doctor named Robert Malone on his show. Even though, Joe Rogan has since said that he's not anti-COVID vaccine, but whatever, dude. We'll just say that he's like vaccine skeptical. But whatever he is, Joe Rogan has used his incredibly huge and influential platform to continuously spread COVID misinformation. So much so that there is somebody who is on the beat of just tracking all of the wild shit that Rogan says about COVID. Their name is Alex Patterson. They work for Media Matters. Here's some of the COVID misinformation claims that he has peddled, right? So much stuff about the virus, how you get the virus, how the virus spreads, how the government is going to track you if you don't get the vaccine, just wild, crazy shit. Consistently. But it was that Robert Malone interview that broke the camel's back. And so that interview aired in December. And so since then, a variety of artists, really big ones like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, they have asked for their music to be removed from Spotify, but also because Spotify also has deals with other podcasters. Some podcasters like Brene Brown were like, no, like until y'all get this shit figured out, I am not publishing anymore, which is a big deal. Like Brene Brown is super, super influential. Okay. So that ball was already rolling, but there's more. So we're in the midst of the COVID misinformation controversy, but then comes the N-word controversy. A video of Joe Rogan saying the N-word repeatedly starts to go viral. And I'm saying the N-word because I want this video to remain monetized. I don't want it to get dinged by YouTube, okay? And so he has said it because this is the podcast started in 2009 a lot. Freely. Freely. Okay. But not only that, right? He has also said and allowed people to say stuff like this.
Planet of the Apes, man. We're going to go see Planet of the Apes. So I look on the iPhone app, and it says, okay, take me to this one. And the guy goes, okay. I go, is that in a good neighborhood? He's like, oh, yeah. Guy barely speaks English. He takes us there. We get out, and we're giggling. Oh, we're going to go see Planet of the Apes. We walk into Planet of the Apes. We walked into Africa, dude.
Ew, right? But that's not it, right? He has also allowed people on his platform to say stuff like this.
There's this whole debate about the MAOA gene, which is like this gene that Black Africans have, like it's like a proclivity to violence that they have.
MAOA gene.
Yeah. I recommend people Google it and do their own research. It's like a big debate about whether or not, but basically like what it is it's, if you think about like, kind of white European, Asian ancestors, as we kind of moved out of Africa, like aggression and violence was kind of less necessary because we were like farmers and stuff.
But right? God, is that really true?
You gotta laugh. You gotta laugh. Old school scientific racism. Old school. Okay. All right. So after that, a variety of artists like India Ari, I think she really got the ball rolling on the racism stuff. And they were like, oh, we are not messing with Spotify either. Okay. So there's this outcry, and it gets to be so loud that Rogan feels like he has to respond. Let's watch this response real fast. Oh.
And definitely no hard feelings.
Start over.
No hard feelings towards Neil Young, and definitely no hard feelings towards Joni Mitchell. I love her too. I love her music. Chucky's in Love is a great song. I don't know what else I can do differently other than maybe try harder to get people with differing opinions on right afterwards. I do think that that's important, and do my best to make sure that I've researched these topics, the controversial ones in particular, and have all the pertinent facts at hand before I discuss them. Again, I'm not trying to promote misinformation. I'm not trying to be controversial. I've never tried to do anything with this podcast other than just talk to people and have interesting conversations. I didn't plan it. I can't believe it's as successful as it is. It was never really an idea that I had.
Okay, he didn't plan it. He didn't plan it. He didn't know it was controversial. He didn't know it would be controversial to talk to a random blogger about the fact that Black people are genetically wired to be more violent. How could he have known that that's controversial? All right. So since then, he has somebody at Spotify is getting to Rogan, because since then he has gone further in defending his vaccine views. Let's listen to the follow-up from his podcast.
This is like the thing about this whole thing, this people being upset at me. I didn't say I'm not an anti-vax person.
Right.
In fact, I said I believe they're safe, and I encourage many people to take them. My parents were vaccinated. I just said I don't think that if you're a young, healthy person that you need it. Their argument was you need it for other people.
So you don't transmit the virus.
That makes more sense.
So
But that's a different argument. All these people that are saying, and in many ways, listen, here's the thing. These are not like planned statements. Let's be real clear.
Yeah.
When I say something stupid, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say before I say it. I'm just saying it, right? I don't have an off-air and on-air voice. I don't.
No.
I have me.
This is us.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got through the fucking net and I'm swimming in open waters. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's just how I live.
Yeah.
I don't, like, if you say you disagree with me, I probably disagree with me too. I disagree with me all the time. If someone said, you have, young, healthy, 21-year-old people who eat well and exercise are not at high risk for coronavirus, but you should think about other people, I would say, well, that's a different argument, and yes, that makes sense. But I would say, aren't those people vaccinated? And shouldn't we vaccinate the vulnerable people?
Yeah.
And then we'd have a different conversation. I'm not a doctor. I'm a fucking moron. And I'm a cage fighting commentator who's a dirty stand-up comedian who just told you I'm drunk most of the time. And I do testosterone and I smoke a lot of weed. But I'm not a respected source of information, even for me. If I say things, I'm always going, check on that, Jamie. I don't know if that's true.
Right.
I do that all the time.
Right.
But I at least try to be honest about what I'm saying.
Or what you feel.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Who else could get away? I'm sorry. Who else could get away with that? All right. So, the beginning part of that little clip, I was like, maybe this isn't so bad. But then it goes on and it's like, sir, you're old, right? Like, you're too old and you're too big and you're too rich and you have too many resources for this to make any kind of sense. So there's a few things happening here. One, the heat must have gotten to Rogan because trying to walk this back after almost 2 years of saying crazy COVID shit is a little sketchy to me, a little sketchy. And two, regarding the racism thing, I was watching the All In podcast. It's, I watch a lot of different stuff. And David Sachs, who's a billionaire, said that it's not fair for us to judge Rogan's use of the N-word because the rules of yesterday are not the rules of today. He's talking about 2009. Our public conversations about racism are so remedial that ostensibly smart people believe that that is a legitimate defense. No, the rules have not changed in 13 years. We're not talking about 1959. That is such a lazy deflection. The idea that in 2009, the first year of the Obama presidency, that way back in 2009, it was perfectly okay for white people to walk around saying the N-word willy-nilly is absurd. It is insulting. It is such an egregious claim. And the fact that people now repeatedly refer to this conversation, the conversation about racism in particular, right? The kind of racism that Joe Rogan traffics in and the kind of racism that he platforms, the fact that people are calling that cancel culture is dead, y'all. We got to come up with something else, put that to sleep, put it to bed, because that's over, okay? Another stupid conversation is, I know Joe Rogan isn't racist. I've seen people say that. I saw, what is his name? Coleman Hughes, who was a young Black conservative, say, I know in my heart, Joe Rogan doesn't have a racist bone in his body. What does that matter? If you are making space for racist speech, I do not care about what's in your heart. So the fact that we're having these conversations, real conversations about the way that racist speech proliferates in our society, and then we have to go back and have the cancel culture conversation, where really, right now, cancel culture is just like a shorthand for like, oh, I'm being called out, or my bad behavior or the bad behavior of my friends is being indicted. It's cancel culture. Stop it. I'm not engaging in that conversation anymore. All right. Now, but speaking of cancel culture, the cancel culture conversation is real interesting, particularly when it comes to Joe Rogan, because I went back and read this New York Times profile about him from 2020. And in that profile, there's a few quotes from a comic named Carlos Mencia. And Carlos was like, oh, it's so funny that Joe Rogan is all anti-cancel culture. Now he's the anti-cancel culture warrior. Because Joe Rogan and his buddies squatted up and organized to ruin Carlos Mencia's career because they felt like he was navigating comedy unethically. They felt like because he was stealing, they basically like tarnished his name, ran him out of the business. Fascinating, right? So there are principles that require people to be shunned and deplatformed. Interesting. Okay, so since all of this has come out, over 100 episodes of the Joe Rogan podcast has been taken down from Spotify. I'm sorry. Somebody said, did my mic just glitch? Did it just glitch? Is it still working? Okay, y'all let me know if the mic is not working. I might have just accidentally bumped it. You know, I'm animated. All right, let's keep it moving. So Joe Rogan is going to be fine. Don't cry for him, Argentina. Because at this point, Joe Rogan is too big to fail. In fact, that was the title of the New York Times profile. It doesn't really matter what he says. It doesn't really matter who gets angry. It doesn't really matter who calls him out. In fact, anger just makes him bigger. Now he's a culture wars figure. And it all comes back to the culture wars. And so I was interested in, like, how did he become this person? Why does he mean so much to this specific group of people? So I wanted to talk about Joe Rogan's appeal. Okay. So Rogan is a thick-necked. No offense to the thick-neck people. No offense, right? I actually like a thick neck. He's a thick-necked, hyper-masculine meathead, you know, the kind of man that a lot of American men wish they could be. He's an unabashed alpha male. He is perceived to be the master of his own destiny. Okay. So here is the quote from Rolling Stone. Let me read this. He said, everything we do or try to do, we try to do a better version of it all the time. We're constantly looking to improve. It's a big part of being a human being. And I think the podcast improves people, not only the people who listen to it, but me as well. All right. Also, writer Devin Gordon of The Atlantic wrote about his relationship to Joe Rogan, trying to get into the Rogan experience and what he believes the draw is for so many men. But that's not why people are obsessed with him. In reality, it's because Joe Rogan is a tireless optimist, a grab life by the throat and bite out its esophagus kind of guy. And many, many men respond to that. I respond to that. The competitive energy. All right, right? Joe's staying power lies in the fact that he has super fans. These are super engaged young men. According to Media Monitors, which is a media research organization, his audience is 71% white, 71% white, and the average age of a Joe Rogan listener is 24 years old. So Rogan basically has an army of young white men. And none of that is surprising, right? You know, men are lost, and there's been so many conversations about this, endless podcasts, books, videos about men needing guidance. And so men, and this we see this in the rise of the manosphere, right? Men are looking for people to tell them you can do it, you're the best, you're at the top, optimize yourself, be your best self, get hot chicks. Like that is a huge industry. So basically, Rogan's platform is an outlet for men reclaiming their masculinity. So I recently revisited this book called The End of Men and the Rise of Women by Hannah Rosen. It's a book published in 2012. And she discusses in the book some of the structural reasons for why men feel, white men in particular, feel so disempowered. Super fascinating. But interestingly enough, this month, a decade after the release of that first book, Rosen wrote this short follow-up for The Cut about how the pandemic has erased workplace gains for women who are mothers. So it's so interesting, right? It took about 30 years for women, and you know, this is going to be primarily white, educated, upper middle class, right? Upwardly mobile women. It took 30-something years for that cadre of women to get all of this power, to get all of these gains. And all it took for a significant portion of those gains to be erased was 2 years of a global pandemic. That's interesting, right? Oh, patriarchy, right? White patriarchy is resilient as fuck. Sorry, I told my mom I was going to try to stop cussing so much, okay? Sorry. Okay. Back to Rogan. He regularly espouses the belief that white men are particularly aggrieved. Let's watch this.
You can never be woke enough. That's the problem. It keeps going. It keeps going further and further and further down the line. And if you get to the point where you capitulate, where you agree to all these demands, it will eventually get to straight white men are not allowed to talk.
Right.
Because it's your privilege to express yourself when other people of color have been silenced throughout history. It will be, you're not allowed to go outside because so many people were imprisoned for so many years. I mean, I'm not joking.
No, I know.
It really will get there. It's that crazy.
When someone says, I'm not joking, are we just supposed to assume they're joking? I don't know how that works. But anyways, Joe Rogan believes that we are barreling toward a society in which straight white men are the most oppressed group. Fascinating. I don't see it. But it's those kind of stances that make him so popular among the anti-woke crowd. Let's get to our next clip. It's Rogan versus the elite. Oh, okay. Sorry, I was just making sure. Somebody said that, okay, everything's looking good. All right. Kiana says Marcia says they want to be oppressed so bad. They want to be oppressed so bad. White men oppressed. Laughable. Funny. All right. So let's talk about Joe Rogan versus the elites. Rogan is anti-establishment. That means he doesn't trust the big institutions, definitely doesn't trust mainstream media, and he's anti-woke. And so that anti-woke stance, that anti-cultural elite stance, we've seen how it makes people so much money. That is what propels the rise of a Joe Rogan Experience. That is what propels the popularity of like a Roseanne reboot. That is what propels Donald Trump into the Oval Office. It is the elites look down on you. You can't trust them. They are consolidating all of this power, right? Like that's it. Also, years ago, Barry Weiss, who is also among, the Barry Weiss is funny, right? Because she's anti-elite, but also deeply elitist. So Barry Weiss used to work for the New York Times. And while she was there, she wrote this article about the intellectual dark web. So basically, it's the intellectual dark web is basically these, renegades, people who buck the system, who have quote unquote heterodox views, right? Like those are the people who dare to be different. And by the way, I'm fair, right? I absolutely believe that some of the disdain for Rogan is about elitism. But do I think that that's most of it? No. And so Rogan is among these heterodox thinkers who have amassed these huge followings and made so much money by saying stuff that is not only unpopular, but really not thoughtful and often incorrect. They believe that by saying these unpopular things, they're doing us all a huge service. But it's interesting to me that so much of this, the movement, the intellectual dark web people, the anti-woke people, the anti-cultural elite people, it is rooted in this idea that cultural power is actual power. And I talked about this in the Chappelle video that I did a couple of months ago. So just because we see Black people or trans people or gay folks like have more opportunities, like get TV shows or get Netflix comedy specials, does that mean that in society, a society that in the United States consists of 300 million plus people, does the fact that those people are more visible in elite institutions or have access to more bigger platforms, does that mean that they out in the world have more power? No. Like the answer is no. And anybody who is really thoughtful and who is actually looking at, I don't know, these statistics that people love to throw out, this data, this research that people love to throw out, knows that cultural power is not actual power. And that's why these identity politics discussions are so silly. And I say that as somebody who thinks that identity politics are often invoked in a really frivolous way. All right. So here is Devin Gordon again saying that it's classism. He wrote, this is in The Atlantic, by the way. The bedrock issue, though, is Rogan's courting of a middle-bro audience that the cultural elite hold in particular contempt. The guys who get barbed wire tattoos and fill their fridge with Monster Energy drinks and pre-order their tickets to see Hobbs and Shaw. Joe loves these guys and his affection has none. Okay, so here's the thing. I really wanted to think about this because I'm always trying to think about my elitism as a person who has a platform and who has access to certain privileges. And I'm thinking like, yes, it is so easy if you read the New York Times or you read the Wall Street Journal or whatever, which is like a conservative newspaper anyway. Maybe, you live on the coast and you look down on the people who live in the middle of the country. But I'm a Black woman from Oklahoma. I've spent most of my life in Oklahoma, in Texas. The reason why I, as, maybe an elite educated Black woman from the middle of the country, feel contempt for those kind of people is because they often have the power to perpetuate really harmful shit. And there's no checks on it. I feel like that is something that is missing from this conversation. Yes, a part of it is the people who live on the coast think that they're so much better because they went to their, elite schools, or they went to a Seven Sisters school, or, they went to Stanford. But a part of it is also that we see in our lives, in our experiences, that middle bro audience, that middle bro audience, they actually do have the power to commit a lot of harm. And in the communities that they exist, there are no checks. Like that for me is the issue. Okay. All right. So by rejecting the mores of cultural elites, Rogan has been able to amass huge power, right? He has this huge power to put people on. He's developed what I would call, the Joe Rogan universe, where it's like, 5 to 10 comics who he has on all the time, and they've gotten big just by being associated with him. Andrew Schultz has said that he has experienced a Rogan bump, right? Just by being on the Joe Rogan experience, he has, grown his platform, grown his followers, been able to make more money. Okay. Yes, a part of why he is despised by the people who share my politics is because of good old-fashioned elitism. But it's not that. It's because of the actual power that so many of those people have and abuse. But it's also because I feel like a lot of people have genuine concern that Rogan is platforming crackpots, but using ignorance as a cover. So let's talk about that. Joe Rogan, in the clips that I've shown, has said, I don't know anything. I'm an effing moron. I'm an idiot. He loves being an idiot. And that is also interesting to me as a Black woman who tries really hard to be informed, who tries to show up as professionally as possible most of the time. I do be cussing, but I'm prepared. It's so interesting that this man has accrued so much power by saying, I don't know shit. Why would you listen to me? Okay. So it's not precisely anti-intellectualism. It's the feigned, I'm just an average Joe. And I will say, cultural elites do love expertise, love a credential. I don't know. Am I a cultural elite? So I don't know. I'm from Oklahoma, so I don't feel like I can be a cultural elite, but I did go to Harvard. But I'm from Oklahoma and I live in Texas. But anyways, so though he often has credential people on, many times the credential people that he has on are saying nonsense. And, when they're saying nonsense, he has no capacity to push back. And even in the clips that I've played, I cannot tell if this is all just an act. Is he really stupid? Can't be, right? You can't get to having a platform that is worth $100 million to a corporation like Spotify and earnestly be dumb. I don't know. So anyways, he seems genuinely baffled that all of this has taken off. He says over and over again, I'm not a journalist. I don't have the skills. Maybe I should actually be thinking of ways to make this better. Sorry, I missed your super chat. Vice City Music. So let me get this right. All these white alpha males are oppressed in fear that they won't be able to speak out anymore. Bless their fragile hearts. Oh, Vice City Music, you really got to the hypocrisy of it all. It does not make sense. It doesn't make sense. How can you simultaneously be an alpha male hunter, master of your own destiny, but also oppressed by the gay folks and the trans, it doesn't make sense. But also, even when we're talking about the upper echelons of power, it is disproportionately who? White men. In every quote unquote elite institution is the same demographic. Anyways. All right. So I will give, one thing I can give credit where credit is due. Rogan is really good at shutting the F up. I'm trying to switch out the F words. He's really good at shutting the freak up and letting people talk. It's a skill. But also, the hey man, we're just talking is also just really smart tactically because it gives him plausible deniability. He and his producers choose the guests. Thus, they choose which conversations they want to have. Okay. And so the Rogan stuff sums up so many of the debates that we have had about digital media and the responsibilities of people who have platforms, people who do what I do, people who do what Rogan does. And so I just thought, let's talk about this. One of the primary questions is, are there people we simply should not have conversations with? Okay, so here is, hopefully y'all can see this, okay? Journalist Matthew Sheffield argued on Twitter that the Joe Rogan Experience has a right-wing bias. In order to support that argument, he came up with this table that outlines the right-wing guests that Rogan has on versus the left-wing guests that he has on. Now, I do have some quibbles with some of the people placed in the right-wing category. I don't think that this is perfect, delineation. But even if we move some of the people that I think are not really, really right-wing over, it's still not equal. Now, that's fascinating to me because Rogan says all the time that he's left-leaning, that he is progressive. He was a Bernie supporter. In fact, Bernie, caught some shit. Bernie caught some heat because he went on the Joe Rogan Experience. So if Rogan himself is more left-leaning, why does he have so many right-wing guests? My guess is, one, Rogan is not nearly as progressive as he thinks he is. In addition to the COVID misinformation stuff, in addition to the racism stuff, I personally have a huge problem with the casual homophobia, the casual misogyny, the casual transphobia. So he's not really that progressive. But it makes sense for me that he would invite more right-leaning people on to have these conversations and to just talk, because right-wing people are shit stirrers. That's their thing. When you have a Ben Shapiro on, he is undoubtedly going to say something that upsets people. Because they live, he's a Candace Owens. I did watch the thing with Candace Owens. In fact, I made a whole video about watching Candace Owens' interview with Rogan years ago. Y'all go back. And the whole shtick is, I'm going to say something outrageous and I'm going to own the libs. And let's be honest, shit stirrers make for good content. They make controversial arguments. That's how the clips go viral. They say things that get our cortisol raised, that get the heart rate pumping. And so somebody like Joe Rogan, who even though he says he's not trying to be controversial, he doesn't know how, I was like, come on, dude, come on. Someone like a Rogan would get a lot out of that. And let me just say, you know what? I think conversations are good. I am not inherently anti having the conversation. I actually think I really got good at talking about my feelings and my political positions because I used to when I was a kid. I'm sure that this is completely unsurprising, but I used to really, as a child, 9, 10, 11, 12, get into real debates with my conservative family members. I actually think it's really important. I don't fetishize freedom of speech or freedom of access to a platform or whatever. But I really disagree with the idea that we don't ever have to, or we should never sit down with people we disagree with. It's just bad. It's just not it's just not solid. It's not a solid strategy, right? And so I think a lot about how we got from, because I'm always thinking about the manosphere. I'm trying to make a video about this, but I think a lot about how we get from a Tommy Sotomayor to a Kevin Samuels, like how the arguments evolved and how the presentation of the arguments evolved. And so I want to know, and I want to think deeply about my responses to that. But that's not what Rogan's aim is. He wants to keep it light. So I think that he feels like keeping it light means that you can't push back. You can't ask questions. You can't do deep research, but that's not true. Rigorous conversations do not have to be adversarial. But, again, Rogan says thinking is not his job. He already told y'all. But then that means you have to deal with the huge risk to that. Someone saying that Black people have genes that make us more prone to violence should never be discussed in the same way as someone saying changes to the climate will result in deadly weather events. And in fact, recently, he had Jordan Peterson on there saying, well, climate's not real. What? Why even allow that? It doesn't even make sense to even platform that argument. It's nonsense. So when there's no vetting of ideas, when we assume that all ideas are equally valid and should be assessed on a level playing field, you give people space to say things that are not only untrue, but dangerous and incendiary. And the thing about the Rogan stuff is you cannot unring a bell. Okay, so 13 years later, Joe Rogan says, well, I'm going to do my best to be more thoughtful and do more research and be more rigorous. You've been platforming this shit for a decade. You can't take stuff back when it's already out there. They're out there and they spread rapidly. And also, the other thing about this is the people who are saying nonsense can actually sound reasonable. When casual people listen to a Jordan Peterson who has made a really big career saying nonsense because of the way he looks, because of his credentials, because he's not coming off like an Alex Jones, it's like, oh, he's making some points. But the thing is, these credentialed, respectable people he has on are people whom the overwhelming majority of, physicians and researchers and their peers say are full of shit. But we don't highlight that. So Rogan doesn't want to take responsibility for that. Now we know Spotify doesn't want to take responsibility for that. Who is responsible? Okay. Who is responsible? Joe Rogan isn't Plato, right? He's not a deep thinker. That's fine. But I'm a moron is just not a good enough defense for negligence. And also, the other thing is people keep trying to throw out the comedian card. Here is a tweet from Whitney Cummings, and it's so interesting. I don't even know how to feel about Whitney Cummings because she seems like she doesn't have rocks in her brain, right? Like she seems like a smart, thoughtful person most of the time, but then she tweets stuff like that. Like, okay, we get it. Comedians are not here to be moral authorities. But you know what I think is so interesting is because comedians have so much, they are elevated in our culture to such a degree that when they want to be taken seriously as cultural critics and commentators and thinkers, they can. So whenever a Dave Chappelle wants to step out and give us a lecture on how we're all too sensitive about trans rights, people are like, well, it wasn't meant to be funny. It was just meant to make you think. But then we also get, well, comedians are not thinkers. Comedians are not scholars. Y'all got to choose. Y'all got to choose. Because this idea that you get to step in and out of the responsibility anytime you want and consistently evade accountability is not going to fly. That position is often abused. But also, who is even asking for Rogan to be perfect? This is a discussion about how and to what extent we engage with claims that are unfounded and unprovable. All right, so we also have to talk about, let me take a look here. Let me say, you say what the comedian lady said, they are full of themselves up until and when they are proven wrong. Okay. So anyways, let's talk about the conspiracy theory part of this, okay? All conspiracy theories are not made equal. If Joe Rogan wants to question, let me get this off. If Joe Rogan wants to question the moon landing or the existence of Bigfoot or the assassination of JFK, who cares? Please, I'm a Black woman, right? If you even talk to any kind of Black man, they be saying some weirdo conspiracy theory shit. You know, I remember when I was dating, you know, like when I was just like dating and talking to people, the thing that I would be so struck by is, and this is no shit to Black men, I'm just saying, this is just my experience. You meet somebody and they seem really normal, and then you have a conversation, and then all of a sudden they're like, you know, 9/11 was an inside job. And you're like, what? You know, it's like, sir, like we were talking about Drake. Like, what's going on? Anyways, who cares about that stuff? I read some study that 40% of Americans believe at least one conspiracy theory. But you know, when I was reading up on like how conspiracy theories travel and who believes them, you know, I don't want to make any broad indictments, but some of the reading that I did on that, when they profiled the people who are most likely to deeply believe in a ton of conspiracy theories, the profile is not great. Entitled, self-centered, narcissistic, cold-hearted, depressed, anxious, impulsive, mildly psychotic. Okay. The spread of mis and disinformation right now is so bad that the World Health Organization has given it a special name. They say that we are right now in an infodemic. An infodemic. Basically, it's too much information, including false or misleading information in digital and physical environments during a disease outbreak. It causes confusion and risk-taking behaviors that can harm health. It also leads to mistrust in health authorities and undermines the public health response. All right. So for the past 2 years, we have been in this environment where the crazy shit your neighbor believes affects you. It affects you, it affects your job, it affects your children. And the thing is, one of the reasons why we cannot just say, oh, what Rogan says on the podcast doesn't matter, the people that he platforms doesn't matter, is because I don't know if y'all realize this, but we're still deep in the middle of a very deadly pandemic. In the United States, 2,000 people are dying every day. Still, 2 years in. That's really bad. And it's so fascinating because we just don't talk about it. Like, it's just not a big deal in the United States. We in this country have just become really accustomed to mass death, but that's a lot of people. And it's not just that, and I know y'all have heard this before, but I have a responsibility to share this information. When hospitals are full of the unvaccinated, which, it's so interesting that Rogan says that he's engaging these people in good faith, right? When Robert Malone says that the vaccination is deadly and it's causing all of these side effects and diseases. It's like, why does nobody ever mention in those conversations that 90% of COVID deaths could be prevented by vaccination? 90%. Yeah. Why does nobody ever talk about the fact that people are not getting the kind of preventative screening that they need to get because of hospitals filled with COVID patients still to this day, right? Why are we also not talking about the fact that when hospitals are overrun with COVID patients, workers are overwhelmed and they have to ration care? Those are easy things to push back on in a conversation with somebody like a Robert Malone. If you're engaging with good faith, why not bring that up? And then, of course, there's the issue of long COVID. We don't even know for real about long COVID, what that means. All right. So the counter argument is that there's no hard data on whether or not Rogan's vaccine misinformation is actually causing people to not get vaccinated. And actually something I did learn when I was doing this research was 85% of Americans have had at least one COVID vaccination shot. Now we know at this point, one shot really ain't gonna do much. Okay, we're in Omicron vibes right now, so one shot is really not really gonna do a lot for you right now. But that's interesting to me. But it's not the point, though, right? The point is, if someone says Black people are born more violent and are born dumber and are born to be criminals, we can't know for sure that their exact words lead to discrete racist actions against Black people. But we don't justify that. We say that the world is worse and more dangerous for Black people because of the dissemination of those ideas. So yeah, the COVID BS is bad. It's so hard not to cuss. How y'all be doing that? How do y'all navigate your lives without cussing? Anyways, that's easy. So what next? What should Rogan and Spotify do? That depends on what you think the problem is. The central tension of these debates is always going to be, are the people who gravitate toward misinformation always going to find out? And if they're always going to find out, does it matter where the misinformation shows up? Does it matter if somebody like a Rogan platforms a Robert Malone, because those people are going to find it anyway? Or is open access to this stuff fueling radicalization? Is both, but emphasis on the latter. So Karen Douglas, a professor of social psychology at the University of Kent, says it's easier now for people who are prone to believe conspiracy theories to find them. And then once they find them, it's much easier for those people to spread those ideas really rapidly. So for people who are most prone to believing conspiracy theories, research from Valerie Earnshaw suggests that once you have to offer up the correct information before they're exposed to the conspiracy theories. So once people are exposed to bad information, if you have a conspiracy theory brain, the well is poisoned. And then getting them back to the correct information is really difficult. And then the more times they hear those false claims, the more sure of those false claims they become, right? It's validation via familiarity. So in response, Spotify's response has been, tepid, shall we say. Tepid. Okay. So they have said that they are now going to they've said that they are now going to be offering content advisories for Rogan's conversations about COVID. Now, all I can do with this is just roll my eyes, right? I don't know which experts they consulted on that, because from what I've read, and I've spent the last week reading, warning people about misinformation can inoculate them from internalizing it. But that is not what Spotify means when they say they're going to be offering advisories, right? What helps is by saying, hey, this is misinformation. Hey, just so you know, you're about to hear some misinformation. Hey, don't take this shit seriously because it's misinformation. That's not what Spotify is going to do. Spotify is going to say, hey, this is a conversation that talks about COVID. For what? What are we getting out of this, Daniel? Who's being helped? And it's also interesting because Spotify is so late to this game. They're just releasing guidelines for what they believe is acceptable on the platform, making that public in 2022, 2 years into the pandemic. It just underscores that platforms are just not responsible. These services have to be built with the dampening the spread of mis and disinformation in mind. But also, we know that those blanket misinformation labels don't work. Joseph Bernstein wrote a really fantastic, and I mean really fantastic, article for Harper's about this idea of misinformation. And he came up with this really interesting tidbit. Basically, what he found was when Facebook tried to label Trump misinformation, remember Trump? Woo, those were the bad old days. When Facebook tried to say, hey, do you know that this thing that Donald Trump is saying is actually false? It barely moved the needle. It did not really have a huge impact on whether or not it was shared. So slapping a digital sticker on something is not going to do it. But interestingly, right, when I was doing the research on, all right, so we have all this misinformation out there. We have these conspiracies out there floating. They're gaining traction. What can we do to stop the spread? There's actually not a whole lot of work on how to combat conspiracy theories. I did find this, right? Changing conspiracy beliefs through rationality and ridiculing. And it's from a group of researchers in Europe. And what they found was that Black and white thinking, the kind of black and white binary thinking that informs the worldviews of conspiracy theorists, has to be elaborated on in order to change their views. So you have to consistently and reliably say, hey, does that make sense? Does this make sense? Hey, you said this little thing right here. Why do you believe that? Actually, it's not like that, right? So in order to combat COVID misinformation, there would need to be well-respected advocates, right? People that people trust, given equal time to highlight inconsistencies and the arguments that somebody like a Malone or somebody like a Rogan puts out. Okay. And by the way, it was really hard to find conspiracy theory research. A lot of it's done in Europe, and that's interesting. And one of the reasons why I think that's really interesting, because, the United States has very particular problems with misinformation and right-wing, the right-wing media ecosystem. But many of those European countries, including countries like Hungary, they have it bad too. They have a really bad right-wing ecosystem. Like those right-wing European movements, oh, there's something else. Okay. So, right after this Rogan, so somebody says, so bully them, because that's what I do. No, that article actually said that ridiculing them actually doesn't work. It works sometimes a little bit, but generally the most effective way to change people's minds is to to keep your composure, to come with facts, and to repeatedly on multiple occasions say, hey, that doesn't make sense, does it? Here's why that doesn't make sense. Hey, I know you said this, but like, did you look at this? Right? Like, that's what they're saying. Like, that's the most effective way to combat that and change people's minds. And so, right after the Rogan stuff, Jon Stewart got a lot of pushback because he said this.
Don't leave, don't abandon, don't censor, engage. I'm not saying it's always going to work out fruitfully, but I'm always of the mindset that engagement, and especially with someone like a Joe Rogan, who is not, in my mind, an ideologue in any way.
So people were not feeling that at all. People were not fucking with Jon Stewart when he said that. But what Stewart says does align with some of the research that I've seen, right? Things do not change if you have an absolute unwillingness to sit down with people you think are stupid. You shouldn't call them stupid, but it's true. But that only works. Even in these studies, they say this only works if the person that you're sitting down with is a good faith actor. Is Joe Rogan a good faith actor? I don't know. You know, he's saying these things about he wants to do better. He doesn't know how he became so famous. He's just an idiot. He's just a moron. He just wants to learn. Sometimes when people point out the missteps, you know, the bad arguments that he makes, sometimes he does seem like he's amenable to being corrected. Sometimes. But I'm not sure. Rogan absolutely does need to make some changes though. And Spotify has to do better. But, and here's where I might upset some people on my side of the aisle. I think that this is not just about the failure of a Rogan or a Spotify. Another argument that I'm very sympathetic to is conspiracy theories are only as potent as the context they arise in. So that Bernstein article, which everybody should read, it's from Harper's Magazine, it cites a French political philosopher named Jacques Ellul, who talks about the importance of pre-propaganda. Okay. So pre-propaganda, oh no, I have to get this big. Another way of thinking about pre-propaganda is as the entire social, cultural, political, and historical context. In the United States, that context includes an idiosyncratic electoral process and a two-party system that has asymmetrically polarized toward a nativist, rhetorically anti-elite right wing. It also includes a libertarian social ethic, a quote paranoid style, quote indigenous American berserk, a deeply irresponsible national broadcast media, disappearing local news, an entertainment industry that glorifies violence, a bloated military, massive income inequality, a history of brutal and intractable racism that has time and again shattered class consciousness, conspiratorial habits of mind, and themes of world historical declension and redemption. The specific American situation was creating specific kinds of people long before the advent of tech platforms. Now, that is interesting to me. So basically, he's saying that, you know, when all of this is horrible, when all of this is horrible, people are more likely to turn to conspiracy theories that make them feel like they know exactly what's going on. Conspiracy theories make people who are prone to believing them feel like they are agents of their own lives. And, you know, the other part of this is, you know, remember when Earnshaw said you have to get trusted information in front of people before they see the untrustworthy information in order to lessen its impact? One of the things that she suggested about COVID is that it's really important for people to have conversations with their family physicians and doctors about COVID and the vaccine and how it spread. But it's too bad that in the United States, we have this horrible for-profit healthcare system that means millions of people have no relationship with the physician that they trust. Millions of people in this country can't go to the doctor. They don't have the ability to establish those deep, intimate bonds with healthcare professionals because they can't go to the doctor. That's the kind of pre-propaganda that Jacques Ellul is referring to. So now we have to talk about the media's role. The media's role. So I talked about Rogan's appeal to the fraught masculinity of young men and the anti-intellectualism that's bound up in all of this disdain for elites. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like mainstream media is perfect and blameless. You know, a point I really agree with in this article is that neither mainstream media or elite institutions have been nearly self-reflective enough about how the messaging in the United States regarding COVID is so bad. So somebody not too long ago sent me this article from Jacobin: censoring Joe Rogan is no solution to vaccine misinformation. Now, I don't believe that. I don't believe that, but that article does have some arguments that I agree with, right? They point out in the article that we are supposed to be relying on the government to give us consistent, informed information. And when we have somebody like White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki being really snarky about sending out tests, for example, right? It makes people not trust them. When we have somebody like an Anthony Fauci, now I'm not an anti-Fauci person, I'm not one of those weirdos, but I can say that it's a big deal that at the beginning of this pandemic, Anthony Fauci willingly and knowingly lied about the effectiveness of masks. So then when you come back and say, just kidding, believe me now, well, there's going to be some people who aren't going to believe you. It makes people not trust the CDC when we have the CDC consistently changing guidelines on masks and what kind of mask to use and social distancing and how many people you can gather with in your home and how long you should isolate. And they're changing these guidelines in a very arbitrary manner. So of course, right, in addition to all of that other stuff, when we have these institutions that we are supposed to be putting our faith in, when they can't get their shit together, it simply bolsters misinformation and disinformation arguments. And then, of course, there's another argument that Jon Stewart makes here. You know, I'm a Jon Stewart acolyte, a big fan.
I think what people don't realize, and I'd love your opinion on this, is how the mainstream American media sowed the seeds for Q's virality by creating that adrenaline and cortisol in people's bodies of fear and always on the verge of disaster and catastrophe. They created the environment that allows these types of things to grab such hold.
Now look, did he lie? Did he lie? The profit motive of the media has led to some really bad coverage of sensitive issues. Because of the structure of the media business, strong emotions are a part of the business model. And this is not even new, right? We can talk about how it's exacerbated in the age of Facebook, where there's no real business model for media. But that's old. These big noted institutions are super guilty of doing unethical and ethically dubious things. Let's get to Christopher. Christopher says, Kim, I appreciate your message, even though I disagree with this one. I don't agree with any of your censorship talk. I appreciate you voicing your opinion as it is. Look, the censorship conversation, let me just say this. There's lots of work on censorship or deplatforming. The work that we have on deplatforming shows that it works. It shows that if there are ideas that you want to stop from spreading, you gotta deplatform them. If there are harmful people who are inciting people to do dangerous things and say dangerous things, the way that you stop the influences of those people is to deplatform them. I mean, it's in the books. It's in the books. I didn't have time to put that scholarship in here, but sometimes people gotta be cut off. All right, so let's talk about the crooked mainstream media again. Okay. So there's no way that anybody who's been paying attention for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years can deny that the mainstream media, these big institutions that we're all supposed to trust, have done very unethically and or ethically dubious things and then try to come clean about it afterwards. Stewart has called what the mainstream media does an information laundering scheme, wherein they float out these bad ideas, they mainstream bad ideas, use really murky evidence, and what is the anonymous sources, even though I'm not completely against anonymous sourcing, but they float that stuff out there and then they manufacture consent. Is that Noam Chomsky who talks about manufactured consent? Whatever. A great example of this is the Iraq War. And I actually visited what happened in the lead up to the Iraq War after Colin Powell's death. And the collusion between the federal government and the mainstream media is absolutely outrageous. Dude, if you want to be mad at the New York Times, if you really want to get mad at the New York Times, let me go back up to this one. Thank you, Madame Bars. I appreciate it. Go back and look at the shit that the New York Times was publishing in the run-up to the Iraq War. It is egregious. I'm looking at you, Maureen Dowd. It's crazy. And then there's very little accountability after that stuff happens. So, of course, now when we are in 2022 trying to reason with conspiracy theorists, trust the experts, it's in the Washington Post, it's in the New York Times, trust these people, the conspiracy theorists are going to be like, trust those people? And then you have to be like, yeah, well, I know they were fucked up in 2003, but they're better now. It's hard. It's hard work. But when we're talking about something like a COVID, this is not just a United States issue. This is not another Iraq war. You have to completely discount all the global consensus about COVID, right? Okay, so don't listen to the New York Times, don't listen to Harvard, don't listen to Stanford, don't listen to the Washington Post. You then have to say all doctors, all public health officials, all researchers in this country and across the globe are united in a conspiracy, that they're on the same page to say the exact same lies. It doesn't make sense, right? We can't get on the same page to do anything else, but we all got on the same page to talk about COVID. That just does not make sense, right? And it actually is meaningful to me that often the CDC and the World Health Organization are at odds. People are beefing. So while I don't think that there's a global conspiracy about COVID, I do think that in the United States, the ecosystem, the information ecosystem that we all have to navigate is really, really murky. And it takes a lot of time to navigate it meaningfully. And it takes a lot of skill. And a lot of people simply do not have that time or that know-how. And that makes it easy for those people to get sucked into the jet stream of misinformation. And it also doesn't help that there is a certain kind of smugness that emanates from the people who occupy those really powerful positions in the media, right? That also doesn't build trust. I saw a really great clip on Twitter of this journalist named Daryl Holiday speaking about the media's role, right? And the way that they should engage people. And I really agreed. Let's watch it.
One thing I'm hearing from all of us, and I hear this even beyond this group, I think there's a network forming, is that we're talking about journalism as community building. Yeah, like we use journalism as a tool, but we're organizers, we're educators, we're facilitators, we're like on-demand investigators. I'm thinking about Outlier in particular. Um, I'm not big on the whole like save journalism rhetoric. I think there's a lot of parts of it that don't need to be saved, but this broadening of the field and like how we talk about journalism, who can be one, I think that's what's going to save journalism. So when we talk about the ecosystem, I think acknowledging that journalism is not just like this ivory tower bestowing, accurate records and the draft of history upon the public is one of the first steps. Like, we're a part of our ecosystem. We're one piece of this thriving network that has challenges, and we have a responsibility to engage with the people who are doing the work of finding solutions.
Yeah, I like him. I thought that was really useful and thoughtful. Thank you, Madam Mars Kim. Thank you for all your hard work. I just wanted to add that Joe Rogan is a cracker. Thank you so much. Reggie's expressions. I love you. I love you too. Thank you. All right. There is one last piece. Okay. We have individual bad actors, which may or may not be Joe Rogan. We have Spotify. We have the dirty, crooked mainstream media. We also now have to talk about corporate greed. Corporate greed. That's the final piece of this. Now, look, I'll be honest with y'all. I don't want to live in a world where there are just a few people making all of the decisions for us, and those are the gatekeepers. I don't want to live in that world. But I also don't want to live in the world where there are no gatekeepers. I know y'all call that censorship, but we need some gatekeepers. But finally, I certainly don't want to live in a world where the gatekeepers are algorithms that are tuned to boost corporate profits. And it's funny when people say, oh, the mainstream media is going after Joe Rogan because he bucks the corporations. He can't be controlled by corporate media. And I'm like, baby, Joe Rogan is corporate media. He is the corporation. He and Spotify are now fully in cahoots. And now this is where Media Kim is going to come out. Excuse me while we go a little bit inside baseball on the structure of the media business here, but I think that this is really important in understanding how somebody like a Joe Rogan can become so rich and so powerful and have so few checks on that power. Spotify will not censor Joe Rogan. He's not. He's obviously not getting removed. And Spotify has done as little as possible because they need to protect their investment. They're a business, and businesses make business decisions. And so let's go back to that $100 million deal that Joe Rogan signed. It is the holy grail of deals, truly. Whoever his reps are should be very proud of themselves. Because to get that amount of money for a deal that sunsets, right? This is a temporary licensing agreement. And the publisher gets no editorial control. It's unheard of. But that should tell you how desperate these corporations are. They need Joe Rogan. So since 2019, Spotify has gone all in on podcasts. They've spent $1 billion buying businesses like Gimlet Media, like Anchor, like The Ringer. They've given all of these smaller podcasters these little exclusive deals. They gave the Obamas $25 million. They gave Harry and Meghan $25 million. Spotify is now the second largest podcasting platform. And they're investing all of this money because they just want to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And they want to get bigger because that means they make more money. Music streaming right now accounts for 85% of Spotify's revenue. They want to get that 85% number down because right now, every time you stream a song on Spotify, Spotify has to pay record labels to stream the music. And they want to go all in on the exclusive podcast because when you just buy the podcast, you don't have to pay a middleman because they own them. And so then not only do they own the rights to that content and they own the rights to those streams exclusively, then they can make money on selling ads in the podcasts in the IP that they own. So yes, the streaming business, music streaming, is very obviously built off the exploitation of people. I thought that this was a very, very interesting statistic of how many streams it would take, right? One musician would need to generate 23 billion streams on Spotify to earn what they're paying Joe Rogan, according to Ted Goya. That's crazy. Such a good representation of how extreme the exploitation in the music industry is. But our current media landscape needs Rogans because polarization creates engagement. And engagement is the only way Spotify is going to get that $100 million back. So it's not like all of this shit blows up around Rogan and Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, is like, oh my God, I didn't know this was happening. How did this happen? You knew it would happen because that's why you gave him the money. You gave him the money because he is a provocateur. Because so much of his content is controversial and people share it and spread it and talk about this. And that's why it's fascinating to see the really piss poor kind of response from Spotify because y'all knew this was coming. You were banking on it. All right. Because that model is not new. Lightning rods have propelled media forever, right? What is it? What's the opposite of rest in peace? Whatever the opposite of rest in peace is, we're gonna say that to Rush Limbaugh, okay? The opposite of rest in peace to Rush Limbaugh. But that's his business model. That was his business model. That's how Howard Stern signed this huge deal with Sirius, right? Like provocative white men saying crazy shit makes companies a lot of money. Okay. All right. So when addressing angry employees, Daniel Ek basically said, look, we can't change course because our business depends on having a Rogan. Here's what he said. To be frank, had we not made some of the choices we did, I am confident that our business wouldn't be where it is today. He also said exclusivity does not equal endorsement, and saying that exclusive deals like the one the company cut with Rogan are what's helping keep the company successful. Yeah. He said, look, if we didn't have a Rogan, we'd be going under. And so they're going to keep going hard with this because they need to grow, obviously, right? Like growth is what keeps the capitalism machine going. And it's interesting because on Spotify's latest earning calls, it was revealed that Spotify's subscriber growth is actually slowing. So they have this Rogan-sized audience, right? But they do not know how to handle Rogan-sized problems, so they try to pass the buck. And one of the ways that Spotify initially tried to pass the buck is by saying, look, we have no control over it. We're just a platform. We're not the publisher. We're not the New York Times. We're not the Washington Post. We're just a platform. Anybody can upload their stuff and have it be streaming on Spotify. Obviously, that's bullshit. Sorry, as I get more and more tired, we're just going to have to cuss more. I'm sorry, Mom. I tried really hard. All right, so why is the platform versus publisher conversation really important now? It's really important now because when a company serves as a platform for user-generated content, it doesn't tell users what to post and can be shielded from legal liability for what's uploaded to its services. When a company acts as a publisher, it has more editorial control over what is said, and it will often create or pay for specific types of content that might draw a profitable audience. Now, this is, if y'all are really, Kimberly watchers, that I mentioned in the Tasha K video, that there's this rule, this law, Section 230, that says that if you're just a platform, if you're just an internet platform, you can't be sued. But if you're a publisher, you are responsible for what you choose to publish, and you do have liability for that. And if you are paying somebody $100 million and you own the exclusive rights to the distribution and the broadcast of that content, you are responsible. You are a publisher. And there is some collusion, collaboration between the Rogan camp and the Spotify camp, because since this racism thing popped off, when they had to comb back through the archives and release so many more episodes for anti-Semitism and racism and transphobia and misogyny. But again, Rogan is huge. I saw someone say having a Joe Rogan is like having exclusive rights to Taylor Swift dropping an album every week. It's 11 million people per episode twice a week. Rogan has the number one podcast in more than 90 markets. And so when we're talking about corporate accountability, I mean, that shit really does not exist. The only thing that even comes to mind, like that's even going to be close to accountability, is the stock affected? And I do think that Daniel Ek, the CEO of Spotify, did feel pressure to come out and say things, because after Joni Mitchell and Neil Young removed their catalogs, the stock dropped 10%. But the stock has since rebounded. But I think that that's really instructive, because in most cases, there's very little that consumers can do to change what executives do. But in this case, there is. I absolutely believe that if there was a mass exodus from Spotify, and I mean like tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, they would feel it, the stock would be affected, and then they'd really have to make some changes. But we see now, okay, what are y'all arguing about in the comments? Okay. Okay, I'm not getting into whatever y'all talking about. But we see now something is going on at Spotify, because they have since decided that they are going to be offering $100 million through a diversity pledge. Daniel X said, "I am committing to an incremental investment of $100 million for the licensing, development, and marketing of music and audio content from historically marginalized groups." You know, it's just too little, too late. So we went through all of this back and forth, all of this Sturm and Drang, right? To finally have the CEO of Spotify come back and say, "Oh, actually, you're right. We do need to be more responsible in who we're platforming and who we're supporting. So I am going to develop this $100 million fund out of nowhere and give it to people we think deserve more of a voice and more support. Now, look, as somebody who has, full disclosure, taken a very large check from YouTube, we love a diversity initiative, right? Like, diversity initiatives really do change lives, for sure. I mean, like, that really, I feel like getting that money from YouTube last year really helped me start off 2021 in a really good place and helped me make better stuff. But is it insulting when it feels like such an afterthought? And even in that little statement that he issued to Spotify workers, it just didn't seem like he really thought this through. But more importantly, the idea that you give someone some money and that sets them up to be a Joe Rogan is patently absurd. It's just not true. There does have to be a more robust network of media that's not as clueless as a Rogan or as glib as a CNN, because cable news sucks. Oh my God, it sucks so bad. Cable news is awful. Now, that's no shade. I know and like and respect a few people who appear regularly on cable news. I went to college with Abby Phillip, went to college with Natasha Alford, brilliant women, but my God, cable news is horrible. So we do need alternatives, and those alternatives do need to be well-funded and well-supported. So I'm not mad at anybody who gets a Spotify check. Not at all. But I'm very skeptical of the rollout of this program. It's giving opportunism for sure, for sure. It's giving afterthought. But anyways, we're stuck in this cycle because of the fetishization of the market. It's all about the market, the market, the market. What does the market want? There's an audience for it. And so much of the Rogan defense boils down to, well, people like it. People like it and it makes a lot of money, but nobody sees a problem with that. Y'all don't see a problem, right? And, Rogan will be fine now. He'll continue to be fine because he makes a lot of money. And he makes corporations a lot of money. But the market should not dictate what's right and what's wrong. And that's why sometimes I'm really envious of countries like a Canada or like in England, where they have like centralized government-sponsored, government-subsidized broadcasting companies where the motive does not always have to be the bottom line. The motive for the news coverage does not always have to be about what's going to get clicks, what's going to sell papers, what's going to drive up the stock price. I mean, the United States is uniquely fucked. Sorry, I said the F word again. Uniquely effed in the Western world because of the way that our media is structured. And so do I think an anti-Rogan would ever be as popular? No, because that's not what the marketplace wants. We're never going to get rid of Rogan because there's such a demand for him. And that's unfortunate. Anyways, that's all I have to say about that. That was my 90 minutes Joe Rogan rant. I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. Let me go back through these comments and see if y'all are saying anything interesting. Ashley says, reminds me of the Bon Appetit controversy a while back. They just replaced all the people who left with more POC as a Band-Aid. Man, the Bon Appetit fumble is, I think, truly, oh gosh, maybe I'll do this on the other channel, but I do want to do like a real deep dive of the Bon Appetit fumble because that is a historically bad mess up in the history of digital media. The way that they fucked that up. I'm sorry, I have to cuss. I'm sorry. Really, really bad. And then they thought that they would, usher out the mad people of color and then bring in new people of color who, let me just say, are very skilled, very charismatic, know what they're doing, seem like good people. But I don't want to see that shit. I don't. Okay. Off topic, are you going to react to Cheer season 2? Maybe. It seems like it's going to be depressing. Is it depressing? I don't really want to have to get into any child essay stuff. I don't really want to do that. Little known fact, Joe adopted the daughter of Dino from the group H-Town. R.I.P. Dino. Whoa, I don't know that. Okay, this is this. Black people are being used to cancel Joe. People who have never paid attention to him are now committed to getting him off the air. POC are the new free marketing HR department. I find this to be so weird. I've seen other people make this argument, and I find it to be so weird. To infantilize Black people and say that we have no agency or control over our feelings, or that when we see somebody make a literal career off of being inflammatory and racially insensitive and platforming hate speech, that we're just being used, that our reactions are not genuine or legitimate, and that we're just being used. I really do not like that. I think it is really true that a lot of Black people's first interaction and engagement with Joe Rogan is probably going to be via the viral clips of him saying racist things or people on his show saying racist things. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? If the first time I interact with you, it's to say you shouldn't be racist, why does that matter? I don't. Any chance you'd review Encanto? Oh, I love Encanto, so I might. Okay. I don't even think it's an actual demand for Jogan so much as a sort of astroturfing kind of thing happening to us as part of a calculated disinformation campaign. But it's not disinformation. Wait, okay. So disinformation would be the intentional and willful spread of false information. Okay. Are you saying that Joe Rogan has not repeatedly and freely used racial slurs on the podcast? Is that true or untrue? If it's true, then that's not disinformation. Is it true or untrue that Joe Rogan has repeatedly had very convivial conversations with people who say absurdly racist things about the intelligence and genetic makeup of Black people? Is that true or untrue? If it's true, then that's not disinformation. Now, one thing I do think is possible is when somebody steps into deep shit around one subject, then people are like, he does all this other stuff too, right? Don't let him get away on this other stuff. I think that does happen. And I think that what often happens with regard to Black people is, for Black people, what we understand is if we just come out and say, oh, that was racist, people don't really want to listen, right? If Black people just band together and just like, oh my God, that racist asshole again, he's doing it again, that doesn't really get people to listen. Honestly, yes, it is true that what often happens is something happens, the ball gets rolling, and then Black people have to come up and say, and by the way, he's racist. And that's the only way that those concerns are taken seriously. But that does not mean that those concerns are not valid. And so, yes, I understand that, after going on the rant about mainstream media and the opportunism that's involved in it, I understand what's happening. That does not mean that the critiques are invalid. That does not mean that the people who are upset about the casual repeated use of slurs or the casual repeated reiteration of racist tropes, that the people who are outraged about that doesn't mean that they're wrong. I also think it's interesting how hard people come for Joe Rogan when our mainstream news is infinitely more guilty with even more reach. I think that the mainstream news is a mixed bag, for sure. Yeah, there is a JRE pipeline to much more hardcore right-wing fascist adjacent YouTubers. Now that is the thing. I didn't even have time to talk here about the pipeline, right? So the concern is not just about Rogan and the people he platforms or the things that are said, right? Particularly when the full Rogan episodes were on YouTube and he was really, really going viral on YouTube a lot. What we know for sure is that YouTube has had, and they're trying to fix this really, really bad radicalization problem. And the radicalization problem is fueled by autoplay. It's fueled by the rabbit holes that people go into. So it starts with a Rogan clip of, what is that man? It's like Chuck Johnson is the name of the man who was like, Black people are just born prone to violence. So you're watching a YouTube clip of Chuck Johnson. I think that's his name. Y'all let me know. And then you're going deeper and deeper and deeper. Joe Rogan is also mainstreamed. That's the other thing, right? And so I didn't, it's difficult to talk about this with the correct amount of nuance because at this point, Joe Rogan is not employed by a corporate media organization, right? Like he's not employed by a newspaper, he's not employed by cable news. But at this point, he is absolutely mainstreamed via his association worth $100 million with this huge corporation, right? They are platforming him, they are promoting him. Yeah. It's corporate media. It's just a different kind of corporate media. Okay. All right. I am so tired. I need to go. Thank you guys so much for watching. I just wanted to, talk about this. Appreciate y'all. Join the Patreon. I'm going to get back on it this week. I think I'm going to talk about Tinder Swindler on Patreon because I have some thoughts. And I don't really want to call this woman stupid in public. Never mind. I've said too much. I will talk to you later again. Please buy cookies from my niece so we don't have any sibling rivalry going on. The Girl Scout cookie link is in the description bar down below. I love you. I appreciate you. Happy Valentine's Day. One day late. Thank you. Leave a comment. Hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. I'll talk to you later. Bye.